can't find nothing on the radio.
You ready, Steve?
Welcome to Songology. He's Bruce,
He's Richard.
and this is another episode from our Song of the Day archives.
Enjoy.
Welcome back, Bruce. We've had werewolves, we've had zombies. What's coming at us today?
Today, you're going to have kind of an old, but yet fairly famous monster coming today. I'm going to start by asking you a question.
Oh, no.
Now, since 1963, there have only been 11 number one instrumental hits on the Billboard singles chart.
A musical question, of course.
A musical question. There you go. Now, most of those were disco things like The Hustle. Remember The Hustle?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Or themes from TV shows. If you remember the Miami Vice theme, that got to number one, right?
Okay, yeah.
And that was actually the last one, the last instrumental to reach number one. That was back in 1985. But in, I believe, 1973, an instrumental song hit number one on Billboard singles chart. And it was performed by an albino. Does that ring any bells?
Yes. You've talked about him.
Yes, I have. The album was called They Only Come Out at Night.
Okay.
You know?
Uh-huh.
And do I have to tell you?
You have to tell me.
Yes, it's Edgar Winter from the Edgar Winter Group.
Okay.
Edgar and Johnny Winter, brothers, though they sometimes play together, but Johnny Winter is not in the Edgar Winter Group. They're both albinos and born in Beaumont, Texas. So you can imagine that growing up in Beaumont, Texas, if you're an albino, the harsh Texas sun, not really that pleasant.
Not a great place for an albino to be.
No, exactly. You got no skin pigment, your eyes are pink, and the sun is kind of a painful thing. So they spent a lot of time indoors and consequently became very, very talented musicians, both of them. Johnny Winter is a very talented blues guitarist. Edgar Winter is a multi-instrumentalist and one of the first guys to use a synthesizer as the lead instrument in a band.
Right.
Now, in 1973, he hit number one with an instrumental piece named after a famous Universal Studios film monster. Care to take a guess?
Universal film monster. Oh, we'd have to eliminate Frankenstein's monster.
No, you wouldn't. You got it.
Really?
Frankenstein. Right?
Well, it's Dr. Frankenstein. What's the monster's name? Or did he just write it about the monster and call it Frankenstein?
Actually, the story goes back to Mary Shelley.
Yeah.
The author, right? Wife of Percy Shelley, the poet. The Shelleys were touring around Europe in the early 1800s. It was 1814, 1815, somewhere around there, shortly after Napoleon got his. And they were touring around. They were pretty well-off people, I think, because it's kind of, let's spend the summer in Switzerland with Lord Byron, shall we? You know,
Indeed,
so it's all
quite.
Stiff upper lips and finger sandwiches in Switzerland. So they were, a group of them, including Lord Byron, the poet, Percy Shelley, the poet, Mary Shelley, are hanging out somewhere in Switzerland, and they get talking about ghost stories, and they decide to have a contest to see who can write the scariest ghost story. And so they're hacking around at that for a few days. And one night, after a storm, Mary Shelley has this terrible nightmare and has a vision in the nightmare of this shambling monster coming to get her, and she immediately bolts out of bed and starts writing it down, and that was where Frankenstein came from.
Right.
Now, where Edgar Winter's Frankenstein came from was an entirely different thing. The band and Edgar Winter himself, because he plays so many different instruments, kept doing different jam sessions. They would just go at it for sometimes 20 minutes, half an hour at a time or longer. And they were coming up with all sorts of different passages of music that they really quite liked. And they decided that they had enough material if they could only edit it together. So they spent a huge amount of time editing this piece. Now, you also got to remember that in those days, in the early 70s, when you were editing music together, that meant physically cutting up the tape and moving it around, right?
Been there, done that.
Well, there you go. And so these guys had tape all over their control room. It's hooked over the backs of chairs. It's laid out on the couch. And so they're moving around, okay, well, what piece goes where and how to put it all back together. And while they're fooling around with this, saying, okay, well, this is the main body. Now, this over here, the leg bone's connected to the thigh bone, right? And so forth. And the drummer, a guy by the name of Chuck Ruff, says, wow, man, this is like Frankenstein. And as soon as Edgar Winter hears that, he says, that's it. That's the name of this song. Right?
Uh-huh.
So they put this thing together. It wasn't originally intended to be really anything but a fun piece for them. And it was the B-side of a single that the Edgar Winter Group released in 73. But almost immediately, the DJs started flipping it over and playing Frankenstein on the air, and it just took off. It's also unique because it features a double drum solo. So there's two different guys and they're soloing back and forth, one of whom is Edgar Winter. And it is also, we talked about him using the synthesizer.
Yeah.
Edgar Winter was the first guy. He would strap the synthesizer on a strap hanging around his neck and run around the stage like the electric guitar players.
Yeah.
Quite the performer that way. And what he's using in this particular piece is a synthesizer called an ARP2600. That is the same synthesizer that was used to create the voice of R2-D2 in Star Wars.
Huh.
So, with all of that, and you gotta love this thing because it just shambles along like mad. Here's Frankenstein.
And of course I have to cut it right there until we figure out the fair use rules on YouTube. But don't worry, in a moment I'll give you a place where you can click and listen to the full song. These episodes were recorded for my radio program back in 2014. And I just moved into my new studio, hence the nice hollow sound. We have about 200 episodes to post before we get on to our new material. So please subscribe if you haven't done so. Now here's your chance to listen to the full song or go on to the next episode.